The new update had released, and we know that there's a lot of things had added into it or got some reworks on. And for one of the reworks, Hydroid got a massive buff here. Well, let's just say that this buff is exactly what Hydroid needs, as we know that in the past, Hydroid just totally not playable at all. But with the new updates here, well, I could say that Hydroid is finally back and online. And for this video, we try to take a look at what is the new Hydroid kit build looks like and how do I try to mod with this new Hydroid. So without further ado, let's hop right into it. Almost all the abilities have been reversed here. Well, I think this is a good thing, consider that in the past, Hydroid abilities were too focused on the C features where you don't really do anything, especially the magnetic damage is also very low and just not used that much. So you can expect that why Hydroid did not use in the past. But right now, all the abilities have changed, especially for the passive, just makes it that Hydroid is become very useful. The first thing we can see here is that the passive has changed from Summon Tentacle to it will let Corrosive Proc become much easier to strip armor, where the first Corrosive Proc will strip 50% of the armors. This also means that any Corrosive from Hydroid's hand has the capability to fully strip with just relying on corrosive procs. This is massive as we know that armor is a very annoying one and we have reserved a lot of ways like the abilities or the focus skill to strip armors. But now just the corrosive procs alone is enough to strip armors. I don't think that I have any reason not use Hydroid anymore. As for the other abilities, yeah, almost all of them are still remain the same except they just changed a little bit, where they changed from magnetic damage to corrosive damage, because we know that corrosive is the main focus on Hydroids now, so of course this corrosive damage is massive. The one thing that changed a lot is that we don't have the third ability Undertow anymore. Instead, they changed it into Plunder, where it will strip armors from enemies while also grant yourself armor and extra corrosive damage, and this value can be increased much further if enemies around you are suffer from corrosive procs. The more corrosive procs they have, the more you can gain, but there's a cap there. Still, this is useful as this also shows that Hydroid can finally become a health tanking frame. Unlike before, there's no such way for Hydroid to stay alive except relying on abilities, which somehow not a good idea for me. So we have two Hydroid builds here. The first one here is a much general build that can be worked on almost all missions. For our first things here, because our aura polarities is a Naramon, so there's nothing much we can go for. Instead, I will be using Energy Siphon mainly because I found that this build can slightly a bit energy hungry, so extra energy regen will not gonna hurt. For our strength, we'll be using Blind Rage and Walk Augmented, mainly because we want our Plunder to reach 100% of armor strip from the enemies. And since the base value is 40, means that we need 250% of strength so that we can reach fully stripped. And because we know that Plunder also generates armor for Hydroid, this also means that we'll be going a health tanking build, which is why we have Adaptation and Arcane Blessing. The reason why we're going with Arcane Blessing and not Vitality is that despite Vitality had changed that it can act as a final multiplier, still, the health value that Hydroid now at the max rank has still too low to generate the high value we want. Arcane Blessing still gave the maximum health, where it still exceeds the value that the health Hydroid currently has. As for our energy, we'll be using Prime Flow and Hunter Adrenaline. Since we know that we are health tanking, I was thinking that using Hunter Adrenaline to generate energy from health damage still being a good choice, and Prime Flow, of course. For our duration and range, we'll be using Prime Continuity, Augur Message, and Stretch. Especially all the abilities can affect by range, so I think single Stretch is enough. And for our augment here, we'll be using Plunder Augment, Rousing Plunder. Because despite we know that we can make Hydroid into health tanky, still, it lacks the health regen potential, unless you really want to use Archon Charge. Otherwise, for this case, I'm using the augment so that we can gain health through casting Plunder. We have the general build, but there's another build that we all know about Hydroid is none other than the farming build. That's because we know that for Hydroid Tentacle Swarm, it has the augment Pilfering Swarm, where it will increase the resources drop chance by 100% if the enemies was killed from the tentacle. Which is why for the farming build, of course we need the augment, except this time around, the range that we need to use is not too high. Instead, we're just using only Stretch and Augur Reach. This is quite different compared to Korra Strangledome farming build, mainly because there's a few things that differs between the Strangledome and the Tentacle Swarm. The main thing you can notice is that the Strangledome don't really have high range compared to Tentacle Swarm, which is why we need to run as high range for Korra Strangledome, but for Hydroid's Tentacle Swarm, you don't have to. And this also results in another situation where it works differently. Strangledome can catch enemy towards the sphere, but for Tentacle Swarm, they just create an area where it will let the enemy stay intact in that position. This is much like a big area of crowd control abilities, rather than the Strangledome where it can pull enemies for easier killing, which is why these two builds cannot be compared as the same way. Instead, you have to look differently. That's why for our Hydroid farming build, we never run the overextended. And because we know that we need to let our Tentacle Swarm stay as long as possible, our duration is also a must, except we're just using the prime continuity and more efficiency. We still know that we'll be using Plunder and we can still make it into a health tanking build, mainly because I found that even though you can summon your Tentacle Swarm, still, those tentacles has a maximum capture rate, meaning you can only capture a specific amount of enemies. Most of the enemies will still shoot you from the afar, which is why we'll be using adaptation and vitality as well as more reconstruction here. Mainly because for this build can be much more budget version, so I still think that vitality can be made good use of here, as for more reconstruction for the healing purpose. Of course, you can change that like the general build, which by using the Arcane Blessing and the Augments again, but that's very dependent. As for our strength, we're just using only one August Secrets, mainly because the Pilfering Swarm Augment didn't really increase the drop chance at all. So for our strength, we just only try to slightly increase the plunder value, which I still it is acceptable. And finally, we have Equilibrium here. The reason why I'm using Equilibrium is that I found something interesting, where a few runs for myself, I just got a lot of energy orb and no health orb. And this is also one reason why I didn't use Arcane Blessing, as I do not want to risk myself initially that I can't take too much damage. And so there I have it. I really think that this update really changed Hydroid a lot because I didn't really use Hydroid that much. So this is why I really think this update comes into play. And surprisingly, I didn't find anyone really plays Hydroid, mainly because of how cold it is. Yeah, see, quite cold, right? Unintended. Still, this video will try to focus on Hydroid Reworks, and I really think that this is a good work. And if there's nothing happen, the next video will try to take a look at the next changes, which I know a lot of people don't like a lot, which is the Shoegate. If this is your first time watching, why not leave a like and subscribe to my channel so that you won't miss out any news contents from me. Why not leave your comments down below if you got any ideas or thoughts you want to share with all of us. And that's it from me, and as always, I will see you all next time. Bye bye!